Hello, this is Sam Musoke, the singing accountant. I have a life hack for you. If you work in finance and use Excel, if you work for an NGO and prepare donor reports, and if you're using Quickbooks or something similar that can't track donor codes. If this isn't you, I recommend you go and watch something else a little bit more exciting. But if this is you, you're going to love it. So here's an example of a donor report. I've got a USAID one here. We've got personnel, each different person on their own line. We've got the fringe benefits, some travel, some specific supplies, and here we've got our activity costs. I've got assessment and enrollment. Now I'm assuming you would have done your activity-based budget very nicely, so here's an extract from that. For each of these lines you've got all your detailed sub breakdowns and activities and resources needed. But I'm assuming that for your donor report you've only got to report at the top level. All well and good. So those are your donor codes, but let's imagine that your chart of accounts looks something more like this. It could be very different, but it might have some codes that really don't match your donor codes and don't have activities in them. How do you get transactions that are allocated by these types of codes to map to your donor report by quite different codes? First thing we need to do is extract a transaction listing from Quickbooks. So you need to filter out just for the one donor you want and list all the transactions for the period that you're reporting on. I've done one here. Here's a transaction list. You'll notice that Quickbooks often has an extra column between each of these. I've removed that. It's an option that you can remove. And I've also added in the account here, which is something you can add in if you want it. That's useful. And you can see that here I've used the classes to track the donors, and I've filtered this so it's only for donor 1. So all these transactions are for donor 1. You can see the total for this period is 10.7 million. Okay, now what you'll notice here in the memo, I've put the budget code, the donor budget code at the beginning of the memo field. So this is fuel allocation for this month for that vehicle, this many kilometers. This is general fuel. That's going on 3.2, which is our domestic travel line. This one here, 8.24, is transport for enrollment. That's going on to this line, which had transport on it, specifically for that activity. Okay? So we've got this code at the beginning here. Now, to the right of this data, without touching any of this exported data, to the right, we can do some clever stuff. So I'm going to try and extract the budget code from the memo here. I'm going to use a formula called left, and it gives me the left part of this cell. So I'm selecting G6. I want the left 1, 2, 3 digits of that, and that gives me a little text string that's just the first bit of G6. And there it is, I've got the code. But obviously if I take that down here, I've only got 8.2 and I want 8.24. And if I take it down here, I'm only going to get 1.2, but I want 1.2.1. So we need actually to use a different kind of formula. I want to get a formula for this 3. Instead of typing in a number here, I want to say I want everything before the space. So for that we're going to use something called search, equals search. Find text. I want you to find a space within text in here, and this should give me the space where the character number where the space is. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. The space is the 4th character in there. I actually want the first 3 characters, so I'm going to do a -1. Now we've got, this is the 3 that was part of my earlier left formula. So I'm going to say equals left. I want the left part of this cell, comma, that's my 3, and there we go. So I now get 3.2, 8.24, 1.21. All well and good. But if I go down here where there is no transaction, it's just a subtotal, I get this error. So I'm going to wrap another kind of formula here called if error. If it's an error, then give me just a blank. Now when I copy this down, I'm just doing Control C and Control V, by the way, to copy and paste. Now I just get the budget code and spaces where I don't want extra references and errors. Now the next thing we have to do is check if these budget codes are in fact correct for each type of transaction. So here I'm going to do a lookup. I'm going to say go and look for this code on the donor report here and give me the thing in column B, because that will tell me if I've got the right code. So here I'm going to do equals v lookup. Go and look up this code. That's a lookup value. Table array is where to look for it. Go and look for it in column A and give me back the answer in, this is the column array A and B, and give me back the answer in the second column. It has to be an exact match. Oh no, it doesn't work. Why not? Well, this is a text string, and this 3.2 happens to be a number, which is really annoying. This is a text string because 1.2.1 can't be a number, even though it says number up there. But this one is a number. So what we're going to do is take this whole column, say text. Unfortunately, that even doesn't do it. We have to go into each one and click it. I'm clicking and then pressing enter, and it gets me a green triangle. And I have to do this for every line in the report. But I only have to do it once. I only have to do it the very first time. Every subsequent month will be fine. Click in and press enter. Click in and press enter. And now these are all text strings. It might say 3.2, but it's a bit of text. Come back here and, oh, it's recognized that that's domestic travel, that's enrollment, this is the salary for those different roles. So that's much better. Now, what about this one? 8.25 is giving me an error. Let's see why. What's happened here? Let's go and look at the memo. 8.25, transport for this person to do assessment. Let's go and check on the donor report. Assessment's supposed to be 8.23. So that means that the data entry person or the coding person or whoever entered the wrong thing here. Now, because this is QuickBooks and we can make changes in our ledger before it's closed, I would recommend making sure that the right person is able to make the change and then have it locked afterwards. So here we're making the change in Excel, but we'd also need to go back and make the change in QuickBooks. Or you could do a journal, depending on, you need to make sure you have the right control there. Now that has automatically updated that to 8.23, and now I've got my budget line there. Let's just have a quick look what would happen if there was no space. If somebody entered that in the thing, you'd get, it's just giving you everything until the first space. So again, you'd have to make a correction in the Excel memo, and you'd have to make a correction in QuickBooks ideally. So that's working quite nicely. But then I've got these errors again, exactly the same problem. So I'm going to use that if error wraparound. If it's an error, then just give me blank, nothing. So now when I copy that down, Control C, Control V, I just get the budget line when there's a transaction. Okay, the next thing I need is the amount. I'm going to turn this into a pivot table, which means I need all the data in one big block. So I can't have some of it to the right and some of it to the left. So it should be quite easy to get the amount. I just go equals and click. Drag it down. But the problem is I'm getting these subtotals, which I don't want. I only want the number if there's actually a transaction. And we know there's going to be a transaction if, say, column I has only got this donor 1 written there, if there's a transaction. So I'm going to put a little if formula in here. So the if in column I there is something, it's bigger than 1, then give me column J. And if not, just make it a space. Just make it not a blank, not even a space. And when I do that, bingo, I lose all those extra numbers and subtotals that I didn't want. Okay, I'm actually going to put a $sign on this I because I'm going to use it again on another column. So the next thing I want is the date. So the date is in column E. So in this formula, it's now going to say, if there is something in column I, then please give me the thing in column E. Very good. But it's a funny format, so let me make that into a date format, short date. and drag that down. Lovely, all the way to the bottom. Now I want the number, which is in column F. So I can actually, FGH, I can just copy that formula across all the way, and it keeps giving me what I want. It's very handy. So now I've got a block of data. It's really important for a pivot table that there's no spaces. You can't have a gap between these columns, and you can't have any cell that's got nothing in it all the way to the bottom. You've now got data that you can use for a pivot table. So you select the top left cell, press Insert, Pivot Table. Okay, so it's giving me a new sheet. I'm going to call this sheet Pivot. And over here I can select what I want in the pivot. I want to have the budget code as the rows, and I want to have the amount in the values. Now, unfortunately, it's counting the number of transactions rather than giving me the value. So if you click on here and select Value Field Settings, you can change Count to Sum, which is much more interesting. And I can just make that a bit prettier. And there I have all my transactions summarized by budget code. Let's just double check. I like doing my proof in total check. 10.797. What have I got here? 10.797. Well, that's lucky, isn't it? Super. So there's our pivot table. And now we need to get this information onto our donor report. So there's a really easy way to do this. I just select the cell, type equals. This is 1.2.1. I go to the pivot table and click. I haven't typed that formula. I've just clicked on it, and it gives me this formula called Get Pivot Data. And there we go. It's in there. So I can copy this on different lines. Oh, it doesn't work because the formula says 1.2.1. It's hardwired into the formula. I would far rather link that here. So instead of it saying 1.2.1, I'm going to say, let's do that. And then when I copy that, I'll get the right numbers. Okay. Now, let's see what happens when we do roll 2. We get a reference. Now, that's because we didn't actually pay anyone in roll 2 during this month. So, yet again, we need this if error. It's a very, very useful formula. If it's an error, then, in this case, give me 0. So now I can copy that formula all the way down into every cell that needs data in it. And, oh, look, there's my total. Let's just again do a cross-check to the pivot table total so that we're really sure it's correct. That's nice, isn't it? So now there's our data report. And if we next month export a new transaction listing for a new month with new data, we just copy over cells A to J. Don't touch anything. In the yellow ones, in these columns here, don't touch anything. Just copy the data here, refresh your pivot with a right click and a refresh, and the donor report will automatically update. So it's very, very easy. Once you've done it once, it's very easy to keep refreshing it. Now, you might say, what about the donor auditor? They're going to want to know what's in this. So when you come to the pivot table, it's so easy to audit. Just double click here, and you get an entire transaction list. Can take out the things that are blank. Can make it look a little bit prettier. Memo the account, make the amount look like that. And there you've got a full transaction list in order of code. So for 3.2, for example, you can see that's the total 416158. There it is. 434156. Oh, there were three. Sorry, there were 3 of them. 434156. So it's really easy to go from this transaction listing to see the subtotals. You could even add subtotals onto this listing if you wanted for your auditor. So there we go. I hope that's nice for you to see. I hope that's useful. This has been Sam Musoke, the singing accountant for Humentum. Let me know if it works. Let me know if you use it. Good luck.